So, here we go. Right. So, I suppose I should do a full introduction, which feels kind of funny because I think we have all been part of putting together this introduction. But okay, of course, this session is part of the DSA conference 2022. It's entitled Urban-centric Innovation Ecosystems and Sustainable Development Views from COVID-19 and Beyond. And it contains a few different papers which reflect on different aspects of this overarching statement. Hopefully everybody has had the chance, everybody who watches this back will have had the chance in advance to watch the paper presentations that were submitted. And if not, please do take a moment to do so, because of course they provide all of the background and context to the discussion and the conversation that we will be having just now between the group. But really, yeah, the idea behind this panel is it will try to explore a little bit how innovation ecosystems can be supported in more sustainable research and innovation practices, particularly focusing on the urban context. I should say that this session is co-run by the University of Rwanda and University College London through an activity that we like to refer to as the Innovation Ecosystems Laboratory. So all of the colleagues that I will introduce here, and welcome to anybody joining. So Remy, Anne-Marie, Parfait are all colleagues from the Innovation Ecosystems Lab, and we will do proper introductions to ourselves in just a moment when we speak about our papers. So very, very quickly, so as I said at the beginning, of course, refer to the videos for full details on these papers. But the one that I am representing, so I'm sort of facilitating, but also representing one of the papers, is the paper, Has There Been an Urban Bias in Directions and Functions of Knowledge Production During COVID-19? So the paper was supposed to really set the scene for this panel. It's not really so much an empirically based paper, but it was really just trying to set out a few of the particular kind of critiques and issues around the urban space and innovation, noting that actually there's an interesting convergence of some of the terms that we use to talk about sustainable urbanism, sustainable urban development, and those that we use to speak about innovation systems. Within that presentation, I introduced a few examples drawn from the laboratory where we've been trying to map and understand the connections between different actors in innovation systems, and finding that a number of those are either situated within or very heavily sort of skewed towards these urban centres, but that actually the pandemic in particular has given a little bit of a pause for thought, and perhaps expanded some narratives and some theories that were emerging before about how key cities are to innovation, accepting that they are huge concentrators of people and knowledge, but that actually throughout the pandemic, which of course is still with us, there have been some interesting disparities in the ways in which we've been able to actually leverage the benefits of cities, let's put it this way, in the ways that we had been previously, for creating new ideas, sharing new ideas, developing new things, products, ideas, services, simply because of the ways in which we've been restricted in being able to interact with one another, with space, with physical entities. So that's a very quick summary of the first paper. And I realized we hadn't agreed a particular order, but is it okay if I hand over to you, Remy, to give a very quick overview of your paper, which focuses on the case of Kigali Innovation City?
Yeah, thank you very much, Carla, for giving me the opportunity to just briefly talk about the paper on Kigali Innovation City. My name is Remy, as Carla mentioned. I'm a PhD candidate at the University College London, the Department of Science, Technology, Engineering, and Public Policy. The paper I've presented for this conference is part of my ongoing doctoral study, and focused on exploring how the academic actors interact for research and innovation creation, use and dissemination in the Kigali Innovation City knowledge space. Kigali Innovation City is, as I've seen in my paper and as well as the presentation, it's one of the Rwanda's government's flagship program aiming at advancing or producing skilled engineers, scientists to advance the country and the region in different sectors of national development. In this paper, I used the broad approach of the triple helix system, focusing on one dimension of knowledge space, mainly because as Kigali Innovation City is an evolving project, and at the time of conducting my research, Kigali Innovation City was mainly including or involving the academic actors, universities, both international universities and the local universities were present physically in the city. So that's why I decided to focus on the knowledge space. And without just doing too much on the details of the paper, I want just to, maybe for this particular discussion, I want just to share a little bit about the implications of my findings for policy and practice, because that's one of the objectives of this conference. The findings of my study suggest that the Innovation City, being a public innovation policy, public intervention for innovation policy, and having the international universities as central actors, conceptualized as central actors. The paper my study found that actually the interactions for research and innovation and learning as well were not only influenced by the academic actors, both the central universities and the universities or actors in the periphery, but the interactions were also influenced by other actors beyond the knowledge space actors, and that includes government initiative or programs, as well as non-governmental organizations engaging in capacity building, as well as funding. Those are conceptualized as hybrids actors through the lens, when you see them through the lenses of a triple helix system. The other important or crucial implication of the study was about the centering knowledge production. With this study, I found that actually the knowledge production or initiatives or activities towards initiating knowledge production were more led by other universities in proximity and less by central universities, which are centrally located in Kigali Innovation City. And with that finding, I suggest that there is really a huge potential for policy interventions and programs to leverage that ability or capabilities across or among the actors in proximity, just to make sure to make Kigali Innovation City more as an inclusive national innovation ecosystem. I think I'll stop by here, and then we discuss more during the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Remy. That's great. And I realize we have some questions in the chat, which we can definitely come back to in just a moment. Apologies, I realize you cannot see me. No, thank you very much for the very succinct summary of your paper as well. And let's come back in some questions and discussion in just a moment. Anne-Marie and Parfait, if it's possible, just to have a very quick overview as well of your paper, Vulnerable by Design, Rethinking Actor Location and Agency in National Innovation Ecosystems. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to this session. Well, for our paper, Vulnerable by Design, Rethinking the Actor Location and Agency in National Innovation Ecosystems, we draw upon different studies that we have conducted, and we also focus on just the roles, the location of, and how the location and roles of different science granting councils or knowledge generation institutions contribute to the science, technology, and innovation ecosystems. And we simply draw upon the different case studies that we covered in different studies. And we also look at the different gaps, different challenges and blockages that could exist in promoting science and innovation ecosystems. Then we also built on existing strengths. In all that, we try to understand existing innovation ecosystems and different intervention programs. And from there, we draw insight on how to improve different innovation systems. And the focus is also on the time of the pandemic. The time of the pandemic, where we don't simply focus on the digital and financial sectors of innovation, but also the way different countries and different science granting councils tried to respond to find answers to the pandemic. We also explore different opportunities for collaboration and partnership as a way of improving the practice and output of different science granting councils in order to generate, or in order to improve responses to the pandemic. Then, at least during the time of the pandemic, and in contributing to innovation generally, we see that the pandemic has really exposed different challenges, and different countries have been trying to address the challenges by innovating, different ways and different processes of innovation to respond to the pandemic, which have also necessitated to rethink ways of organizing and deploying different innovation systems. But in all that, though the situation was complex and very, very complex and critical, the interaction and collaboration between different actors, whether located at the center or at the periphery, revealed to be very important. And in terms of our paper and the findings in line with this presentation, strengthening collaboration and learning from each other through sharing knowledge and insight from various locations and agencies was very important. And if we talk about how different SGCs or different institutions in charge of knowledge generation or in charge of responding to the pandemic, how they were influential and played an impactful role to address the pandemic. We, of course, found divergent in terms of the nature of different SGCs, but generally engaging with different actors, either at national level, regional level, or at the center level, or at the periphery. The collaboration and networking reveals to be very important in order to put efforts together and find responses to the pandemic. Of course, there were some gaps, but we see that trainings and technical support activities really contribute to creating opportunities to improve interaction between different actors, and also learning from one another. Networking and collaboration are really key on that. But then we see that there are some very interesting points that matter and which we should be capitalized on in order to get maximum opportunities from the networking and the collaboration practices. Such points relate to location, location at the periphery, location at the center, and being able to combine and draw upon the different ecosystems and actors in order to not to diverge, but to put efforts together. We also see proximity, mainly geographical or even content proximity in terms of cross-country or national collaborations as being very important to respond to the pandemic. Again, historical belongings also matters, because in terms of collaboration and networking, capitalizing on existing relations or some sort of sharing a common background is also an asset as different SGCs or different knowledge generation or research institutions work together. Then as we conclude and learn from our study and provide some sort of recommendations, we also see that, facilitating mechanisms and activities that promote working together and networking is part of what we should recommend for different actors and different agency roles to work together and contribute to responding to the country's national or regional or international pandemic or any other need that might arise. Well, I think I should stop here for now, and probably we extend more through the discussion. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. And yes, thank you for the introduction to the paper. So absolutely, we have just under 15 minutes for a bit more discussion. So we do have some structured questions that we can use, but we also very, very much invite questions either in the chat or verbally, whichever you would prefer from the audience as well. So if you've watched the video previews, or if anything in the kind of introductions or discussions so far have sparked additional questions or thoughts or comments, as we say, please feel free to either drop them in the chat or just let us know that you would like to speak and to ask. I would actually really like to come back to, and I realize the question in the chat might not be visible to everybody if you joined us after it had been submitted, but I think that's a nice place to start, perhaps, going back to the Kigali Innovation City case. So Remy, do you think that the case that you've presented can be a sort of place-based innovation policy that can be replicated in other cities in Rwanda, including secondary cities, or even other countries in the region? I mean, thoughts on that would be wonderful.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kala, and thank you, Parfait, for this question. I think the findings, or the policy implications presented in this paper, they are based on the pilot study, which was purposefully narrow in a sense, because it was focusing on only the academic actors, how they interact, and I would broadly say it's possible for Kigali Innovation City Innovation City model to be replicated in secondary cities of Rwanda and possibly other countries, of course, with the caveat of context in different settings. However, I would say that this question actually is part of my post-pilot study, where, unlike in a pilot study where I made the assumption that Kigali University is a national innovation policy intervention, but moving forward with my pilot study, I'm taking another second lens where I view Kigali Innovation City as an urban innovation intervention. In that case, my research questions are more towards understanding the embeddedness of Kigali Innovation City, and like questions like who are the citizens of KIC? For instance, there are universities, researchers, students, and others, and how, to what extent are smart in terms of when we talk of smartness, and this case is just production of knowledge, and then to what extent their smartness influence the rest of Kigali. So I believe that it will only after that my post-pilot study where I will confidently be able to draw some recommendations which will be grounded, empirically grounded, and possibly provide a viable evidence towards whether or not the model of KIC would be replicable in other cities in Rwanda or beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Remy. I wonder if it's okay to stay with you, actually, because I think it maybe sort of follows on a little bit from this, and actually, as you say, that within the context of this being a pilot study. But it would be good to hear about any important opportunities, particularly of things that you've observed emerging from the government academia interactions in Kigali Innovation City, particularly.
Yeah, thank you very much. In my detailed paper, they are very useful insights, if I may say so, whereby the government of Rwanda has played what is known as a innovative government or public policy actor role, where beyond putting in place the policy and strategies for the KIC as a strategy, but also going forward to providing infrastructure and incentives for universities and other actors to locate Kigali Innovation City. Those are just advantages. But on top of that, the government of Rwanda has been playing dual role. One being, on policy space and regulations and others, but also for funding some of the interactions between universities were made possible mainly because of universities, let's say the central actors in KIC and actors in the periphery were jointly working on a research project funded by the Rwanda Council of Science and Technology, which is a government entity. So those are the opportunities of having universities and research entities co-located in one geographical area. but also there are more conditions to be understood for the KIC to become a comprehensive or inclusive innovation ecosystem as by its definition.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Remy.
Okay.
And Anne-Marie, I wonder if we can come to you with just a couple of more structured questions. I am keeping my eye on the chat to see if there's anything else coming up, but particularly given the title of the paper for the session, as you said, Vulnerable by Design, as the main title here, it would be really useful to know a little bit more. And I know you've elaborated a little bit already, but what were the really key vulnerabilities identified within these systems, and perhaps a little bit, or even some examples on what science granting councils and others have been doing to try to sort of recognize and bridge these vulnerabilities, or perhaps if they just remain as vulnerabilities, acknowledged or not so much.
Thank you very much, Carla. Well, I try to briefly talk about the different vulnerabilities and what the science granting councils have been doing. Well, in terms of vulnerabilities, you know, they differ from location to location, and the agency of the different councils. For example, in terms of knowledge from the councils and the human resources, those different in the councils, and also you know, like being knowledgeable and drawing upon the knowledge, whether from research and development, to give response to contribute to responding to the pandemic in different countries. In some countries, we see science granting councils being at the center of the response to the pandemic, whereas in other countries, we see the councils participating maybe through playing a periphery role, or even contributing in terms of generating new knowledge. In some countries, for example, we saw councils funding researchers to contribute to finding answers to the pandemic at medical level. You know, different doctors finding ways of testing the COVID-19. Other scientists finding ways of, you know, like the washing hands, the washing stations in different parts, as a way of stopping the pandemic. You know, there were different vulnerabilities in that regard, and different councils have contributed either as scientifically to provide evidence-based solutions, or to also train in terms of training and capacity building. We saw different councils contributing in that, and working hand in hand with the government agencies to find solutions. And also in terms of innovation, we also see different councils and spearheading the different innovations to respond to COVID-19. For example, we see that at least in the Rwandan context, you know, the councils, the NCST was almost getting in the media with sensitizing people to wash hands and also explaining in a scientific way how the washing hands, the soap and all that contribute to removing the virus. We also saw the different councils working hand in hand with the other institutions like the security, for example, and also mobilizing the youth to be aware of the pandemic and to also contribute in fighting the pandemic. I know that we had youth volunteers who were in charge of, you know, explaining to the population, giving like layman information to everyone, but that information was in a way scientific, but spreading the information to everyone to be able to protect themselves against the pandemic. So in a way, we see that there were varied vulnerabilities, but councils have tried to be involved and contribute in fighting them in relation to other stakeholders. So partnership and collaboration was very key. Well, that's what I would say for now. If my colleagues have got something to add, or if there is any other question, I'll be happy to extend more. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. So I think we actually have reached almost the end of the session. We only have about 2 minutes left. So I'm going to just make sure that for anybody who is interested, that the web link for the Innovation Ecosystems Laboratory is actually in the chat. I know I mentioned it at the beginning, but you can find out a little bit more about us and what we do on the page here, a little bit of a description of what we are. But yeah, I've realized that we really do need to draw to a close, and it's really flown by the 40 minutes that we've had. So thank you very much to Remy, to Anne-Marie, and to Parfait, who I think may not be with us just now. He may have dropped out, unfortunately, but thank you for his presence as well. And to everybody who joined the session or will join in future by watching the session back. And thank you very much. Yeah, I think perhaps if we just close again with that quick reminder that this session really tried to focus on innovation ecosystems and particularly try to unpack a little bit about the urban context and urban issues and urban setting in which a lot of these innovation ecosystems take place. And I think, as I said at the end of the short video that I produced for this conference, we all probably do well to remind ourselves that there are very good reasons, and we've articulated a number of those here, for centering resources, processes and institutions for knowledge production, synthesis and application in the urban setting, but that it isn't and really shouldn't be where the world of knowledge and innovation does end, and that events like COVID have really given us the opportunity to see the very different ways in which actors interact across space, across time, across institutions, within cities, within countries, and actually at much larger spatial scales. So I'm very happy to close the session there, and thank you again to all colleagues and all attendees.
Thank you, Carla.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.